Okay, so I'm here today with Silvana Richardson. Hello, Silvana.
Hello, good morning.
Hi, thank you very much for taking the time to come and talk to us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. So let's kick things off. And can you tell us a little bit about the native, non-native debate in ELT and how it's affected your career?
Sure. Interestingly enough, the native, non-native debate in ELT is not a new one at all. It's one that started over 30 years ago with Peter Medias and the publication of his book, The Non-Native Speaker. Basically, the core issue is this idea that's really very old, that came with a direct method, that if you can speak English, then you can teach it, and with the importance of teaching only in English. So this has led to 100 years of privileging native speakers as teachers over non-native speakers. And it came with a sort of damaging deficit view of those who spoke English, not as their mother tongue, but as an additional language or a foreign language, as people who spoke a deficit version of English, and therefore, they were not the ideal teachers. That was the view at the time. So a long time that this view has been installed, if you like, in ELT. So what that has meant is that a lot of teachers who have studied English for a very, very long time, who have had the experience of learning English, and therefore a particular empathy and skills that were developed because of learning English rather than acquiring English, have been marginalized. And that has been my experience as well. I remember particularly, this is important where you try and teach English in countries where English is the official or the home language. So when I came to the UK to live, it was very, very difficult for me to find jobs. And actually, I only have GCSE level, so secondary level Spanish, my mother tongue, and I was a professional teacher of English as a foreign language, and yet people were hiring me to teach my mother tongue, for which I had absolutely no qualifications, and were not selecting me for interviews, etc., to teach the language I was a specialist in and a professional in. And I've seen the very same situation with other colleagues, who had lived in the UK for about 25 years, spoke almost perfect English, were professionals, and, directors of studies were saying, that's all very fine, but I don't want her in my school. Also, I know from other colleagues and stories of people who have told me that in other countries where English is not the mother tongue, this is also a prevalent situation. So it's affected my own career in the sense that by the time I came to live in the UK, I was a teacher trainer, and I had to start from scratch, and I had to do qualifications, like, for example, a diploma that I really didn't need because my own qualifications were strong enough but unrecognized by local employers. So it really did set me back for about, I would say, 5 to 10 years.
Okay, and so earlier this year you gave a very rousing plenary speech at IATEFL on this very topic, and it got quite a reaction. So were you shocked by the reaction, or how did you feel, and what did people say to you afterwards?
It was very interesting because I knew before doing the talk that I was touching a nerve, that there was something there that needed to be said, and it was the right moment to say it. But yes, I was completely surprised by the reaction. I certainly did not expect such a strong reaction from people. And I think what was really important to me was the personal stories. When after the talk, a lot of teachers came to me and said to me, you absolutely described the situation in my country, in my state, in my region. This has happened to me. How many stories were given a voice? That was, for me, was very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was absolutely brilliant. There's a lot of interesting blog posts on it, and a lot of people, the conversation got restarted and kind of put into the spotlight.
Yeah.
So I suppose the next step is how to address it and what we can do about this situation. And I want to divide the next question into three segments. So first of all, what can we do about this situation from a teacher's perspective?
I think if you're a teacher and you're a teacher whose first language is not English and have gone through years and years of listening or noticing that there are privileges for the native speakers, you kind of grow up accepting that situation. That's the status quo, and that's it, and there's nothing I can do about it. And that's, I think, the first thing I'd like to challenge. that if this is a moment to challenge it, it is, and there are channels to challenge this assumption. So the first thing I would suggest is read the TEFL Equity Advocates Campaign, which is a website, and it's got a lot of ideas about what teachers can do. So some of those ideas are to raise awareness, for example, by using social media. So, if you are not very active in writing, but, if you tweet or retweet any stories or any posts, that advocate equity for the non-native speaker. If you're more daring, write blogs, posts, etc. Talk to the colleagues in your staff room, raise awareness of these issues. So also, for example, INSET, seminars or workshops on this issue so that you raise awareness in your school, among your other teachers, but also your director of studies, the people who are in power and have the power to recruit and select teachers.
Yeah. Speaking of which, language schools I want to come on to next. How would you like to see them take the debate forward, and what could they do in terms of pushing equality?
Well, I think the first thing is that quite a lot of directors of studies and people who recruit, owners of schools, have yet to wake up to the fact that the non-native teacher has got a lot to give, and that as long as the important thing here is not an accident of birth. The important thing here is who you are as a professional. Professional qualifications. How good you are in terms of not just your language. Of course, language proficiency is important, but not just your language proficiency. Your ability to teach the language, your ability to communicate with students, your ability to establish a good relationship, and all that is really very important. And I think schools and language schools sometimes privilege nativeness, even without a lack of qualifications. So it's about, first of all, raise those people's awareness that is not acceptable anymore. So that thing, and once you go over that, then it's about understanding people's qualifications, particularly where you run a school that hires people from many countries. You need to be able to understand that not everybody will have the famous or the recognized British qualifications, a certificate, the diploma. I don't want to name names, so, they started as British, but they have become international qualifications. That's not a universal route. You can have many professional, well-qualified teachers with different professional routes. Like, for example, some people study teacher training for 4 years, but because they're not well-known, people, read those qualifications on CVs and they just bin them. So it's about, I think it's about becoming more aware of how different routes work, what they are called, so that when it comes to reading a CV from somebody who's not, who has, it doesn't say certificate in teaching English or diploma. So what does that mean? And give them the chance, interview them, find out. Even a certificate or a diploma is not necessarily a guarantee. Yes, they take a number of if you like, of assessment criteria, but they're not necessarily the profile of teacher you want in your organization. So give people a chance and listen to these people. I would say for me, this is something that is not just about the native and non-native issue, but the best test of whether the teacher you're hiring, you're interviewing is the best teacher for your organization is give them the chance to micro-teach, to teach for about 5 to 10 minutes. And that's the best test. And that's where you see the really professional, good teachers that you want, and you can tell. And that's what I would say to schools.
No, that's a very interesting idea, actually. So you're seeing a snapshot of their teaching skills, but so it's about experience and about qualifications, not about birth certificate, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, finally, from a personal perspective, here at Macmillan, what could publishers do about this? Is there anything you think of that publishers might be able to do?
I think you're already doing very good work by interviewing, and bringing this issue to the fore, like what you're doing today, and raising the profile. Publishing, I would say, publishing more about this issue, but not just talking about it, but the related issues around. You can't separate the native non-native issue with what people who have who speak languages other than English can bring to ELT, and that research has recognized this as very important, which is the use of the student's own language, and how people who can speak other languages can enhance the teaching and learning of English through the use of the student's own language. I would like to see much more of that for example, in books, for students, in supplementary materials for students, in teacher training materials. At the moment, there are certain things, such as multilingualism, the use of the student's own language, that in methodology, as I said, there's not just one or two research studies, but there's overwhelming evidence that the use of the student's own language helps, of course, in a principled way, helps, and rather than being a barrier, is a useful tool to learn foreign languages. And because the idea of the native speaker has been so important, particularly of the monolingual nature, those who only speak English. That pedagogy has been also marginalized, and I think it needs to be brought more to the fore. So, particularly, as I say, in teacher training materials, supplementary materials, give teachers a chance to understand why this is important and how to create not just a failed monolingual, but a student who's a multilingual user, a bilingual speaker of English, in an increasingly global, multinational world. I think that aspect is not doing the student any favors, let alone the non-native speaker teacher.
No, absolutely. So brings me to my next question, which I think kind of feeds in from your answer there. But how do you feel about using L1 in the classroom? Obviously, I think there's definite benefits to it. Would you encourage it through your teacher training?
Absolutely. I mean, as I said, principle and judicious use. There's a lot of research that says if you use between 4 and 10% in whole class interaction, particularly at the lower levels, there is absolutely no evidence that it increases the use of the student's own language. It actually doesn't do anything. So there's nothing wrong with using the student's own language. There's also research that if the teacher uses only English at all times, it does not increase the use of the students' use of English. So clearly there is something there. There's also a research around the importance at the lower levels of using a bit of the student's own language to reduce anxiety. Of course, if you're anxious, you can't learn English. This is well known. So, the students feel anxious if you use only English, particularly at the lower levels. So, it's very, and also, I don't want to bore you with this, but I think it's important to bring it to awareness. To raise people's awareness. The other thing is that, again, especially at the lower levels, students need to make connections between the words and the phrases that they already know with the target language they're learning. And this thing that you need the language you know to learn the language you don't. There's a lot of research in neuroscience now that we now know. So clearly the message is, in the right dose, and at the right level and for the right reasons, using the student's language is an advantage, and the student's own language is a useful and helpful tool to help them learn English. So, yes, I am in favor of it. Of course, if you like, the problem that it brings for the monolingual English speaker is that you need to learn the student's language, or you need to have some kind of functional ability to speak the student's own language. And, of course, it works better in monolingual, so where all the students and the teacher share a mother tongue or a language. It's more difficult to do in multilingual classes. However, it's not impossible. And there are some books that give very good ideas, like Philip Kerr's, for example, that give very good ideas about how this can be done. So, yeah, totally in favor.
Absolutely brilliant. Okay, and in your current role as a teacher trainer, obviously you see lots of different teachers in different teaching circumstances. From your experience, what do you think are the key ingredients to becoming a successful teacher?
This is such an interesting question. And, if I had a day, I could answer it in more depth. But I would say, first of all, a love for the language that they teach and a love for teaching and learning. It's very important to really, really love what you do, because that is inspiring and is motivating, and a love for students, to want to be there. Because if you really have a passion and an inspiration for the language that you teach, for learning and teaching, and for the people you have in front of you, you will really be dedicated, interested, curious and want to keep learning, which is fundamental.
Brilliant. So love of language, love of students, key ingredients. Okay, well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to talk to you, Patrick.
Excellent. And very good luck with continuing the cause. We'll keep raising awareness and see how things go. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.